So the first thing I would do before I start the lab is I would try and get a good feel for how things are laid out in the HTML and CSS that were provided. And the best place to do it is in the dev tools. In other words, I'm currently in Chrome, but Firefox has one too. So if I right click and I choose inspect, you get what are called the development tools. And I've showed you these in earlier videos, so I'm just rehashing. But this is a great place to play around to try and figure out what's happening. So this is the CSS or the HTML page, and the CSS is down below here. Now, incidentally, depending on how you like to see things, there's a little customized tool here. Both Firefox and Chrome have it, these little ellipses, and you can choose where you want your dev tools to show up. So if you prefer to have it on the right-hand side, you can have it on the right-hand side. If you prefer to have it on the bottom, because that's easier for you to see. If you've got two monitors, you might undock one of these, so you can have your dev tools show up as two separate windows. Whatever works best for you. The bottom line is getting comfortable in dev tools is really going to be beneficial to you when things, as we progress, and we're certainly progressing, things get more and more advanced. Let me just show you what I mean. So if I were you, first of all, I would close out this console. So I'm going to close that out because I just want to see this particular piece. I'm going to use my little double-sided arrow and drag this little window piece up so I can see the styles that are being applied and also the HTML. And so here's what I would suggest to you. Here's the HTML, and I will kind of use these arrows to drill up and down into the structure. And I'm going to start with this, let's start here, for example. If I click on div class equals columns, calls, and I can't do kind of both at the same time because I lose my shading, but I'm holding my cursor over div class equals columns, and you can see on the left-hand side of my actual HTML, there is some shading. And that shading is trying to give me a clue as to what makes up that div. In other words, I'm going to drag my mouse down to section, and you'll see the shading changes, and now that's just the section. So that's a good way for me to first of all see how it's being laid out. So also notice, I'm back up to this div class equals columns. Notice that the colors are changing, my shading colors are changing. And those shading colors correspond with our box model margins and paddings. In other words, again, I'm going to have to lose my shading momentarily. But if I click on this div class equals columns and look at my box shadow, my box model, it's showing me that there is padding of 50 on the top and 10 on the sides and 5 on the bottom. Looks like there's no border and no margin. But also notice that that padding is green. And so the green shading there is matching the green shading in my HTML, trying to indicate that the padding, this is the padding. And you can see that 50s on the top and 10s are on the side. So this is a good indication. If we had margin, let's say there was a margin of 20 that was applied, then you'll also be able to see that margin. So this is a good place if things aren't lining up the way you think that they should. This is a good place to kind of experiment and see if you can make those adjustments, kind of a live playground, sandbox if you will. But it also gives us a good indication of how this site is currently being laid out. So not only that, if I click on div class equals columns and I look down here, these are the actual styles that are being applied to that div. So what is the div currently receiving? And it goes from bottom to top. In other words, if anything is overwriting, this is what's applied first, this is what's applied second, third, and fourth. And so it gives an order of operations, if you will, and exactly what is being applied and where that was being applied from. In other words, this div received all of these stylings from the body, and they received these on line 1 of my CSS style sheet. But what we're interested right now is what these columns are doing. So here's that class columns, and that's being applied here because we have class equals columns. So remember, these are the styles that are being applied currently to this div. And so there's where the padding 50, 10, 5, and 5 is, which we just saw here. Those are on lines 19 of the style.css page. And then there's also this margin top. So what do I mean by something overwriting? and order. Well, again, I can just sort of play around in this. It's not affecting my actual style sheet, but I can give you an example. Let's say that I also gave this a padding of 50, let's just say 50 px and see what happens. And so notice that this line just got overwritten because there's a conflict here. This is the order in which the browser rendered all of the styles, and when I applied padding 50, there was a conflict here. There was already padding applied. Well, this is more specific, and so therefore this style was being overwritten. Well, if I'm not sure why a style isn't showing up, or something's not doing what I wanted it to do, I might come in here and see if I accidentally overrode a style that was already on here. So I can uncheck that and see that now this is no longer being applied. It was on the style sheet, but it's not being applied. So back to our original page. I just refreshed so I could get rid of that little sandbox thing I was doing. So again, coming in here and clicking on each of these different elements so you can see what's being applied. I'm going to click on this section one. So again, you can see that just the Stitch and Lilo column is being shaded. It looks like I have a margin on the right hand side because of the orange shading, which also matches the fact that down here it says I have a 28% shadow or padding. And if I look at the styles that are being applied to that particular section, I can see that it's receiving a float left, and it's receiving it from this line, line 29. So it looks like my columns are being floated to the left. They have a width of 300. They have a margin right of 5%. And then you can continue on. You get the idea, hopefully. There's a columns that's being applied because each of these column 1, column 2 are nested inside of the column, so it's still receiving the columns. So whatever the columns styles were applied, the children are also getting those styles unless the children overwrite those styles. So again, order specificity is important, and this shows you exactly in order of what things are being applied. Again, from bottom to top, this was applied first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so it gives you a good idea of what was applied and what that element is currently receiving. Just to continue on with this idea, because we're going to be utilizing these, let's look at this primary section. Well, I'm not sure where this content is. So this little icon on the top left-hand corner with the arrow pointing at an element is helpful because I can click on it and hold my cursor over an element, and I want to hold my cursor over this entire section. Now there we go. So now I can see from the little pop-up that this is the section.main content. So if I click on it, I'm going to see where that is in my HTML page. So there's the section class main content, and here is the style that's being applied to that main content. So that's kind of a way to go backwards and forwards. So again, if I click on this little icon and I just move my cursor into my HTML area, I have to click in it. Oops, maybe I didn't click. There we go. So now I'm moving my cursor over here. Here is the side box 1. Here's side box 2. And if I go a little bit higher, I should see that whole section. So, in fact, what I was trying to get to was the section. This is the big section. So I clicked on it. I was trying to get to this section sidebar, but there we go. So now I have the sidebar. So again, someone else's code can be difficult to follow, but this is a great place to come in and really try and get a hold of what is the HTML elements and what is being applied and where can I find that style on the style sheet. So get comfortable with the dev tool. It will help you in the long run.